Like what we're doing here at Cube4two? Hit the like and subscribe button to let us know. Alright guys, let's get started. What's good, Cubers? It's your boy Matt. I'm back and it's card of the week time. Let's get started. This week's card of the week is a card by request. Matt, please make Teferi Time Raveler card of the week. It seems the jury's still out on this one. I'm testing it, but Azurius is stacked. Don't sweat it, your boy Matt's got you. Here we go. Teferi Time Raveler. For 1 and Azurius, you get a legendary planeswalker Teferi with 4 loyalty. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. +1 until your next turn, you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. -3, return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand. Draw a card. Teferi can be a difficult card to evaluate because it's hard to know if the static ability is messing with your opponent or not. A lot of times in our playtesting, I had to ask my opponent at the end of the game, hey, how much was this messing with you? Was this screwing up your plans? So let's talk about that first ability first. They can only cast spells anytime they could cast a sorcery. So this affects a lot of different kinds of cards and can make Teferi very polarizing, especially in regards to counter spells. Teferi hoses the control mirror. If you're in a control matchup and you slam down Teferi, you have turned off all your opponent's counter spells because they can only cast them at sorcery speed, which means they can't cast them at all. So in a control mirror, Teferi just straight wins the game a lot of the time. Now, the other thing that Teferi's ability does is he stops combat tricks like Integrity, which I have been trying out in my cube. But other than Integrity, there aren't a lot of combat tricks in Cube. We don't play them because we're scared we're going to get 2-for-1. Therefore, Teferi's not great against those. The next case of scenarios all involve removal. Now, at first blush, this might not seem like a good look. After all, you can play removal at sorcery speed, but what Teferi does is forces your opponent to make all their decisions on their turn. Real world story. I'm playing the aggro deck against a blue-white control deck. They play Cloudkin Seer early, and because Teferi is down, I Doomblade it on my turn to clear the way for my creatures. But because I couldn't Doomblade on end step, which is when I would have rather done it, I had to go ahead and make the decision early. On my opponent's following turn, they slammed God Eternal Kefnet with no fears of it being removed because I was forced to use the Doomblade early. This might not seem like a big deal, but my opponent had more information than me throughout the game because they got to play at instant speed and I was stuck making all my decisions on my turn, giving away my plans or my combat tricks before combat because I had to cast them in my main phase as sorceries. So all those little things added up. The second part of Teferi that makes him interesting is his plus ability. His plus ability lets you play sorceries at instant speed. So one of the big benefits of this is that you can cast Wraths at instant speed, which is just backbreaking when you swing into a Wrath of God at instant speed. And I'm in the red aggro deck, maybe I just played a hasty so they picked up one more creature than they would have had they been forced to play Wrath of God on their turn. It also lets them preordain on my instep. If I don't cast anything, they can cantrip on my instep, and it turns their sorcery speed removal into instant speed removal. So these might seem like not a big deal, but actually in the control deck, getting to live your entire life at instant speed is just really solid. It's a decent plus and is underrated, I think, by a lot of cubers. The final aspect of Teferi is his minus ability. Now, Teferi's minus lets him bounce an artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. And this is a Reflector Mage-like ability. Reflector Mage comes in and bounces a creature and then they can't replay it the following turn. Teferi does allow them to replay it, but he can also bounce artifacts or enchantments and you get to draw a card off of his minus. I want to show you what the floor of this ability looks like. This is the worst case scenario. You're playing against an aggro deck and they've got 2 creatures on the board, let's say. You just got hit with Goblin Guide, and main phase 2, your opponent dropped Krinko. Alright, it's our turn. We play Teferi. We minus Teferi to 1 and bounce Krinko because, Goblin tokens, that's bad. So we bounce Krinko, buy Krinko, we draw a card, and then we pass the turn. Now our opponents on their turn are going to swing in with Goblin Guy, but this time they're going to kill Teferi because they don't like to let us keep our walkers, which means we've taken no damage and Teferi has replaced himself in our hand, and then they replay the Krinko. All of that is actually fine with us because the goal of the control deck is just to extend the game. So in this case, Teferi is fine, and that's his floor. So I actually think Teferi is pretty doggone good. Actually, when we compare him to the top end of what's considered Azorius' guild, their best cards is Papa Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and Fractured Identity. And I actually think Teferi compares pretty well with these guys, in the sense that he's much cheaper. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, can't bounce a turn 3 Krinko unless you've got mana rocks to ramp him out. What this means is that Baby Teferi gives us early interaction that Papa Teferi does not. Now, I still love Fractured Identity. This card is so good. I don't actually like comparing it to Baby Teferi because they do very different things. And Fractured Identity is costed a lot more than Baby Teferi, but it's supposed to be closer to a Azorius finisher. Like, it's the top end where you remove your opponent's big threat and make a copy of it. So, Baby Teferi is efficiently costed, early interaction, and has the ability to just straight win control matchups. So let's evaluate this card. Baby Teferi is really, really good and compares favorably with the rest of the Azorius guild. The real drawback to this card is its price, because it is crushing in standard right now, so it's 20 bucks a pop, and if you're a foil fanatic, like, forget about it, the card is really expensive. Baby Teferi gets a lot better the more flash and instant spells you have in your cube. Teferi shuts down your opponent flashing in creatures on instep, he shuts down removal on your turn, he shuts down counter spells, so the higher power your cube, frequently, the better Baby Teferi is, because higher powered cubes play more flash and more instant spells and less creatures, which means that floor scenario we saw earlier is less likely to happen. Although if your cube is lower powered, you probably rely more on creatures in combat, in which case Teferi plays a little more like a reflector mage, but I still think he's worth including. I think the card is a solid B+. Again, he improves the more powerful your cube is. I like Teferi, I think he's worth picking up, and maybe after rotation though, depending on your budget, just saying. That's going to do it for today, Cubers. If you've got a card you want us to cover for Card of the Week, be sure to leave it in the comments below and we'll take a look at it. Like, subscribe, hit the little bell in the corner so you never miss a video. Follow us on the Twitter at cubefortwo, and as always, and until next time, shuffle up and keep cubing, my friends.